Welcome to Advanced Insights. I'm Mark Papermaster, CTO and EVP at AMD. I'm excited to continue this series where we provide just what the show name suggests, advanced insights into some of the most exciting trends and topics in technology. In this episode, we delve into how AI is driving modern system design to be able to tackle the incredible demands of AI computation in the cloud, the edge, and in end-user devices. I'm joined here today by John Rose. John and I have had an opportunity to work together for years. He is the Global Chief Technology Officer and Chief AI Officer at Dell Technologies. He's responsible for establishing the company's future-looking technology strategy and the implementation and execution of AI for Dell and its customers. He fosters a culture of innovation to keep Dell at the forefront of the industry while anticipating the customer's technology needs before they arise. John, it is great to have you on the show.
Well, great to be here, Mark. Always fun to talk to you about technology.
What I'd love to do is compare notes with you on the disruptions you and I have seen. We both are veterans. We've been around a while, but you and I have talked. I don't think either of us have seen anything like we're going through right now. And I'd love if we could get started with some of your perceptions.
It's a very diplomatic way to say that we're getting kind of old. We've been doing this a long time. You measure your career in tech by primarily, interestingly enough, how many big inflections you've gone through. And we've been through the internet, the World Wide Web, the web browser, the client server architectures, large-scale enterprise systems, the dot-com bubble bursting, a whole bunch of, several Gs in the telecom space. Nothing I have seen is like what's happening now with AI. The first thing to realize is while AI is a gigantic inflection, maybe the biggest ever, the reason for it is because we have built this incredible foundation of technology that kind of makes up our modern ecosystem. Now, that being said, it's a big deal because it's really about the rebalancing of work between people and machines at the cognitive level. The Industrial Revolution was all about rebalancing work between people and machines at the physical level. But the reality of it is this time around, it's about thinking work. It's about decision making. It's about cognitive work. And we've done a little bit of that with AI and other techniques over the years. But this time we have tools that are able to speak human. They're able to engage with humanity without a technical interface. And because of that, it has proliferated over the last 2 years to be in the art of the possible in almost every dimension of society. And so we now have broad acceptance of this is coming. It does interesting things. Maybe it just creates content or it engages with us in interesting ways, but it does it at a scale and a performance and an impact level that we've never seen before. And so, at the end of the day, we're going to see a huge amount of the work in the world go below the machine floor. And while that will be terribly disruptive, every time we've done that in the past, where we've moved work from people to machines of some flavor, we created a catalyst of productivity and we created a next era that was significantly better than the previous one. That's been history. And now we have a gigantic one happening in a newer area that's happening beyond everything I said, fast. And our prediction is, literally in the next 2 years, almost every enterprise in the world will be adopting these technologies and seeing significant shifts in where and how work is done and enormous productivity gains. So yeah, it's a big deal, a lot of work for all of us, but we're not starting from scratch because it's built on the foundations that all of us have been building for the last decades.
You hit the nail on the head of a point, and that is just not how fast this adoption curve is and why. And your statement was, we're now talking to the computing. What generative AI did was, for years we've been trying to improve human-computer interface, and I'd say there's just been these small little incremental gains until ChatGPT came out, and suddenly the ability to get at vast troves of information and to be able to do deep analytics became a spoken interface. And it suddenly just lowered the whole barrier to get at technology. And not only does that mean that it opens it up to every walk of work, life, and play, but it for a company like Dell, a company like AMD, the access became immediate and the need for more computing became meteoric. And so what a transformation for what you and I do and our companies do.
Both of us, I know, have had lots of different jobs. I've run, one of the most interesting jobs I had in the technical side was running a human machine interface or UX. And it's interesting. What you're describing is there's one truth in technology when it interacts with human beings. If the technology speaks and interacts on human terms, mass adoption occurs. If the technology, as a prerequisite for it to be used, requires humanity to change, to learn a new language, to learn a new skill, the ramp up is incredibly slow and it never really becomes pervasive. And what you just described is, is very similar to what happened with the GUI and pen interfaces, things that brought technology into kind of an intuitive interface that humans could use without significant training or reskilling. ChatGPT was that. I used to tell people, the day before ChatGPT and large language model pervasiveness, 100,000 smart people in the world could do AI. The day after, 7 billion could.
You and I have talked and agreed that it's changing the whole innovation environment. Like startups now can do things that they couldn't dream of doing before this era of generative AI. And you just recently, got on the road and talked to a number of startups. And I remember as I talked to you just after you got back, it was a real pulse on some of the change that's going on and how startups are moving incredibly fast to change applications of AI. Our listeners would love to hear your insights there.
Yeah. I used to live in Silicon Valley and then I moved back to the East Coast. So now I go out to Silicon Valley to get my fix of the startup ecosystem. There are many startups and many of them do interesting things, some kind of crazy things. But the bottom line is they're a good pulse to try to figure out what are the smart, creative people in the tech industry thinking about. And if you talk to any one startup, I don't know if you get a very good pulse, but if you go out and talk to a whole bunch of them, which is what I typically do, and you start to see patterns materialize. Now, I saw startups that were building flying cars and autonomous tractors and all kinds of cool things that were all very heavily dependent on AI and these technologies. But the one pattern that emerged that I think I shared with you was I kept going into meetings and a startup startup A would say, I am looking at revolutionizing this job. Could be a marketing copywriter, could be a Kubernetes administrator, could be, any job you could imagine, any task that people do that requires human effort. And they all seem to have identified a job or a set of jobs. And then they said, well, I'm going to use AI to solve for that. But what I figured out is I need to make the AI kind of look like a worker. And in order to do that, I'm embracing these new concepts like autonomous agents and ensembles of agents and this idea that the AI will not act like a giant monolithic system behind the scenes through an API that no one can understand, but instead, AIs will emerge as individual instances. If I need 50 Kubernetes administrators that are delivered as AIs, then I will have 50 agents. And if I want to have a whole collection of agents with different skills, creating technical papers or doing marketing tasks, those agents will look as if they are individual instances of a digital skill. And, all that sounds very good, except I went from company to company to company, and they were all using this language, and they were all building it. And then the most fascinating thing is most of them realized that the way they would actually build and execute their startup was not to take an army of people to build a set of agents that someone else could use, but instead to take an army of agents and a few smart people to create the new product, the Kubernetes virtual administrator or whatever, and bring that to the world. And so we started to see this kind of flywheel effect that the innovation in AI that they were taking advantage of to build to create a new product offering was actually the tool that they were going to use to scale their startup. And that, to me, back to our discussion about humanity, people kind of understand that. If someone comes to me and says, you need to do this complex task, what's the first thing I do? I assemble the right team of people with the right skills to go do the work. And as in the black box example, I'm not sure where the skills are in the AI, but when it's an agent that shows up that can do programming or an agent that can do research or an agent that can do writing, the way I think about that flow of work in an enterprise or the flow of work in developing something is actually kind of exactly how I think of it today. It's just some of my work are synthetic and some of them aren't.
When you create those agents, what people are really doing is they're tailoring each of the operations are there. There might be a different LLM, a different large language model trained and very specific to one step in a task, and then it flips over to a different, very tailored and much more accurate LLM for another task. And so that ensemble of an agentic AI flow, which at each step is getting the most accurate model, the best knowledge capture it can, that's really powerful.
Well, the other thing we saw, because we're doing a lot of work inside of Dell, in my other hat of chief AI officer, we're figuring out how to make this work in our company to take advantage. And we're doing a lot of work with agents. And because we are hands-on with these now, and think of it as the agents, to your point, they are specialized. One of them is really good at programming. One of them is really good at content creation. One of them is really good at, kind of rationalization of a particular logic. Well, it turns out that when you build that team to go tackle a complex task, and it's a combination of a set of distributed agents working together, but some humans involved, you start to see what the human role is. And one of the things that we saw very quickly is that a lot of the work, the rudimentary work, can be done by the agents. But the coordination of it, the selection of it, the ultimate interpretation, and even applying the ethics and morality of humanity is not something agents do very well. AIs don't do that very well. And it turns out that when you create this ensemble that's a few people and a bunch of agents, and they're all working together in an organized way to actually get a task done, you end up with kind of the best of both worlds. You have these very, very powerful and advanced and high-performance tasks that can be done by the agents, but all the gray area that makes people nervous about AI, will it behave properly? Will it hallucinate? Is it bad or good? Aren't a debate anymore because there's a human sitting in the middle of this thing that isn't doing all the rudimentary work, but is definitely in the loop in this example. Anyway, those will still be useful, but it's really exciting because in a span of less than 6 months, we're feeling like a huge number of projects for an enterprise that cares about accuracy and ethics and culture. This model of this combination of AIs and people working together is likely going to be the one that will get its adoption faster than other paths.
Couldn't agree more. I will tell you, I'm very involved in the AI projects that we're implementing in AMD, and we're doing it, across product development, legal, IT, every facet of the company. We're using RAG on really across the board to drive our accuracy up, and now tailoring to agentic processes you described. But we have a responsible AI group, so you can't just run AI how you wish at AMD. You have to go through our responsible AI, where we do ensure the right objectivity of any of the data sources that we use, and that we're really being ethical in all of our applications, et cetera. That comes part and parcel with your new role. You talk to enterprise customers, John. You've lived it, you breathe it, you're driving it in your enterprise. How does that help you as you then help your customers?
Yeah, I mean, let's be very honest. I mean, this AI cycle started 2 Novembers ago. ChatGPT popped out. All of a sudden, 7 billion people could contemplate the idea that AI could be useful. We then spent the last year as an industry primarily just building foundation models. Most of the AI business today, the large-scale deployments, are about building massive training infrastructure for the purposes of building foundation models. Now, the good news is we now have some closed, but many very good open models that are creating a foundation of technology that is allowing us to then build on those. Well, what are we going to do with this? Well, there's one camp that will go reinvent search and do a bunch of things in the consumer space. Great, that's lovely work and it should happen. But there's this other path, which is the enterprise, which is we're going to apply these technologies to make our enterprises better, not worse, better. And the challenge with the enterprise market is the barrier of entry is quite high. Enterprises do not want to take risk that will put them out of business or damage their reputation or confuse their customers. And AI technologies, as they exist today, are still maturing. And so the enterprise market, probably about a year ago, started to form. And over the last year, it's primarily been characterized by experimentation and figuring it out, is the only way I could describe it. Almost every CIO I talk to of very large companies has some projects going on, but nobody's declaring victory yet. I can see where I want to apply this. I'm understanding the technology. I have a few pilots. I'm building my platforms. I'm organizing my data. It's almost a readiness phase that we've been in. If you're going to do AI, the most important question you as an enterprise should ask yourself is, what makes you you? What makes you special? And the reason you have to answer that question is you can apply AI to anything. And if you ask everybody in your company where the AI should be applied, it's everywhere. And so this is very resource intensive. And so figuring out where to apply it for the best value starts and ends with you really understanding what makes you and your company special. At Dell, it's real easy. We went and analyzed it. And we came back and said, pretty straightforward. Our global supply chain, biggest secure supply chain in the world, very strategically important to us. Our global sales force, largest enterprise sales force in the world, very strategic to us. Our product development capability, we build products for a living, that's super important to us. And our global support structure, the fact that we have this gigantic support capability. And so immediately, as soon as we knew that, we could start to gravitate towards, let's go solve those first. Let's prioritize these. Let's understand where the prize is. And all of that governance work, I think the things we've learned, things you've learned, we've been sharing with the industry. And I think over the last year, a lot of customers are now at the point where they kind of know where they want to apply this. And they kind of understand the boundaries of acceptable use and where they're not willing to sacrifice. Like one thing people realized over the last year, your data is your enduring value. The minute you give it up, if you give up your enterprise proprietary data to somebody and it gets absorbed into an AI model, it is gone. That intellectual capability, that differentiation has now been neutralized. Anybody can do it. But the second half of the story is, okay, I now know what I'm going to do. How do I do it? Now we have to figure out how to put these systems together because they're not a turnkey shrink-wrapped software package. They're not a cloud service entirely. They're a stack of technology that comes together to create digital workers, to create AI agents, to create entirely different experiences. I think we are maturing our thinking collectively about what AI is and why it matters. And now we're in the phase of collectively accelerating it by sharing our learnings, having some companies like us moving very fast and learning and basically shedding information, and having other companies learning from that information. But collectively, that will accelerate the enterprise market. And to be perfectly honest, that's where the big value is.
You know, it's really changed the role that companies like Dell, AMD, our colleagues in the industry, it's changed the way that we work with enterprise customers. It's become a solution partnership. I've always known your pre-sales team. I've always known, oh, wow, Dell's got a great pre-sales team. And we've always interacted, I'll say, more transactionally. Well, here's the data that we provide you, and you bring it out to your end customers. And I think you did this, you know, likewise in a similar way with the other technology partners. Well, now it's different. Now, all of us work as an ecosystem to provide end-to-end solutions, more than solving problems, setting up an AI infrastructure for our enterprise customers, which is tailored to their needs. So it's changed the game. It's changed the way you and I have worked together and our companies have worked together. And John, I know it's changing the way that, on our side, that we're even designing our computer chips. We now think about it much more holistically across the whole stack, and it affects every aspect of our chip designs. Give me, please, your perspective on the whole computer system design. How is this changing the environment, changing how you design computer systems?
Yeah, I mean, first, there are multiple areas of AI, especially generative AI, that all have what I'll call accelerants on compute architecture. In the training environment, the accelerants are obviously GPU innovation, et cetera, but power and cooling and physical design, data center design. The beauty there is in the early cycle of these large training infrastructures, we are learning tremendous lessons about where the boundaries are and where the hard limits are, and then we're collaborating deeply. To your point about the ecosystem, it's no longer, our customer has a problem, throws it over the fence to us. We kind of think about it, throw it over the fence to you. Eventually it comes back. No, the only way we can move fast is we're all at the table together. Okay, let's go solve that problem to build out that massive data center infrastructure to go train foundation models. That's been really good. On the enterprise side, it's way more complex because in the enterprise world, it's not really about training models, it's about putting them into production. And it's not just about putting one model into production, it's about creating digital skills that cover hundreds, if not thousands of roles and functions within an enterprise. And the minute you start thinking about that super complex set of outcomes, you realize immediately that, well, if it's instantiated as compute, you got to make sure the compute's in the right place with the right person in doing the right thing to make that happen. So in the case of, I want to build a large-scale chatbot to support my service organization. Well, that problem requires me to build a large data center and aggregate a lot of inference capability. Great. I think I can do that one. It's pretty straightforward. But then if they realize, if I do it all in the data center and I don't know, the network goes down, the service professional can't do their job. What's the logical thing to do? Well, let's convert some of that functionality to an autonomous agent that can run on the AI PC that the person is carrying around. That's a different technical architecture. And as we all know, as soon as we put that AI outcome on the PC, it led us to build NPUs, to build more advanced GPUs, to change the software frameworks for things like WebMN and Onyx. And it led to an entirely different technology cycle, which everything I just listed is not built by any one company. And that ecosystem has to work together to achieve that outcome, because if we don't make an AI PC an effective platform in the enterprise, then that design of agents to support my support people gets captive to the data center, can't survive a network failure, is less efficient. And so in almost every dimension, the AI will gravitate towards where it logically ought to live and where is the best place for it. And as we know, computing environment and enterprise are highly distributed and highly heterogeneous. If AI wasn't interesting just enough at the use case level, this is a new class of workloads that is self-optimizing is the best way to describe it. It's gravitating towards the right place, and the right place might not be ready for it. And that could be a bad news story, except if you're in our industry where we like those stories because it tells us what we need to do to build the next processor, the next computing architecture, the next storage system. And so it is probably the most influential set of workloads that we've seen in a long time in reshaping everything from client architecture to data center architecture to power and cooling and acceleration. And honestly, if you're an engineer in this industry right now and you're asking the question, what do I build next? You need to pay a lot of attention to the AI ecosystem and how it's emerging, because it will tell you what it needs. And that's likely going to be the future requirements of your chip, your product, your system.
It's reshaping every segment you just described, and it's reshaping how we architect, how they work together, how it's seamless, because you just said you're not going to be able to run your compute needs in any one single segment of the compute industry. It's going to be cloud to edge to endpoint and all of the ecosystem around it. It's a fundamentally different computing ecosystem going forward, driven by AI.
Yep. And funny, Mark, again, back to our ages, we've done this a few times before. Right? Remember mainframes, remember mini computers, remember the first client server architectures, remember the cloud era. I mean, we do reinvent ourselves. This one's, again, just happening faster and probably with bigger impact than we've ever seen.
Well, John, let's conclude by a little bit of future telling here. So, the largest cloud installations of, that are working on AI have already said they're going to keep growing in the search for artificial general intelligence. Are seeing that they add more compute, they're getting more accuracy. So for the foreseeable future, that path is clear. But you and I were talking about enterprise. It's not as clear. There's a bit of prognostication here. How do you see the next 5 years shaping out for enterprises as they think about their computing needs with this emerging AI workload?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to recognize, you're right. There are these two worlds. There's the path to AGI and then something called ASI, artificial superintelligence. Let's AGI is making AI as good as a person. ASI is make it better than a person, do things humans could never do. And so there's this, path to the, the $1 trillion cluster and all of these things going on. They're not independent of enterprise on one dimension, in that what we're learning over there is actually much of the technology that gets shed out of those initiatives, which are those are the hero projects, are actually applicable to the enterprise. For instance, we're learning things about networking in these large-scale environments that tells us that the network that you need today to build a training infrastructure might be the network you need in 2 years in an enterprise to build your large-scale inference environment. They're kind of similar, and there's some trends that are emerging. And so in general, first principle is don't ignore that world. You as an enterprise do not need to build a 1 trillion node cluster. That's not something necessary for you. Somebody else will do it and you'll get the benefit from it. But look at the design patterns. How is networking evolving? How is storage evolving? How is compute evolving? How is orchestration evolving? How is management evolving? And what we're learning over there is how to kind of do these things in the AI world at large scale. And we've all learned this. It's way easier to scale something down than up. That just in many cases, that just becomes simpler. But the enterprise side, in the near term, that 5-year time horizon, not only going to learn a bunch of lessons from the other side, but we have original things we have to solve for. The biggest is that it's not really a training environment. It's an inference environment. We are actually putting AI into production, and we are trying to make it do things that actually do work. And so that's why I think that a lot of the innovation on the enterprise side is less about just the raw performance and scale, even though those will matter, but it's more about this nuance of the diversity of the enterprise. The fact that I'm not really trying to solve a single problem. I am trying to solve potentially hundreds or thousands of problems that all reflect different tasks and functions that belong in the enterprise, and today maybe are being done by human beings at a very slow rate, and we might be able to do them faster. What we've learned, though, interestingly enough, is that that journey, all that innovation, is not just about the technology. We will have to learn how to do agents, we'll build agent ensembles, we'll build repositories, we'll build these orchestration frameworks, but there's an equally important piece of work, which is, what are you actually applying it to? If you took a bunch of intelligent agents and applied them to a legacy process in an enterprise that had never even contemplated AI, just because that's how you do it, that's a terrible decision. So the other half of the discussion is, you have to ask yourself, well, is your process and the way you approach code development, the way you approach customer support, the way you approach supply chain, actually even compatible or appropriate for the AI era? Like everything in the enterprise, yeah, technology is super important, but process and people are as important as the technology. And that's not really true on that other side where we're just building big training infrastructure. So I think all three are going to move quickly. Today I'm very excited about agents. A year ago, I wasn't using the term. A year from now, I think I'll still be excited about agents, but I'll also probably be a lot more excited about advanced data management techniques that materialize. Because I think one of our biggest challenges is the back-end data systems are not where they need to be. And the current approach, even vector databases and some of the early tools, are not sufficient. And so we're going to see a lot of innovation on that side. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it has to get better. I'll make my prediction valid. We can come back in 2 years and we're probably right. Agents, policy, process reengineering, data ecosystem, cybersecurity, distribution out onto the endpoints, all that's going to be true for 2 years. At the 2-year point, even though my job is to predict the future, I don't know. Because if quantum happens sooner, or if some disruptive algorithmic approach occurs, all of this could change. But the one thing we do know is it's not going to slow down. It's going to just accelerate faster versus where we are today.
John, I loved your insights. I can't thank you enough for joining us today, talking about just this incredible period of inflection that we're at, and the excitement that you and I both share moving forward. Thank you very much.
Mark, thanks for having me. Always great, talking, but also collaborating. And, hopefully we're a good role model for the whole industry that, we will do much better on this journey if we all work together and learn together.
Absolutely. Thank you. The main takeaways from our discussion are around the disruption that AI is bringing in every walk of our work, our play, our daily lives. We talked about agentic AI, which is tailoring to specific tasks and bringing both big productivity and accuracy gains, and how AI is changing from a focus on training to real-world inference applications in enterprise, and the role of tech companies, which is morphing to be that of a solution provider. And lastly, how going forward will be as much about process change and adaptation as it is about the technology change itself. Thank you for joining us today on Advanced Insights. I look forward to bringing you more in-depth conversations on cutting-edge technology, industry insights, and visionary perspectives from some of the brightest minds in the field. Technology is always advancing, and I can't wait to share more insights with you next time.